Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm really happy to have this opportunity to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is plants. Not deer necessarily, but definitely plants. As Carrie mentioned, I've been working as a landscape designer for Johnson Landscapes and Pools for the past 9 years. Actually, this month it's been 9 years. And also, I've just been researching the topic of deer-resistant plants for more than 20 years, ever since I moved up to Bedford, and have found that plants that I have planted have been eaten the next day when I came out. We all know that feeling of getting up in the morning and looking forward to going out to look at our garden and see if there are any new blooms on any of our plants, and finding in the place of where the plant was a mangled bunch of roots and some deer footprints. So I'm going to try to help give you some information so that we can avoid having that in the future. Basically, my approach has been to not necessarily fight nature. We have to kind of learn how to work with the deer in such a way that they won't want to come to our property. I use deer repellents as part of my process, but we're not going to really focus on that tonight. There's so many plants that deer don't actually like, and I can't even cover all those plants tonight. I'm really just going to focus on my favorite plants, the things that I have been very successful on. One of the resources that I have found to be extremely helpful is actually listed on the handout. And it's a website put out by the Rutgers Cooperative Extension. And it lists plants that are not favorable to deer. But what they do differently that a lot of the other websites don't do is that they actually have a rating system. Rather than just saying that deer eat this and they don't eat that, they rate them on A, B, C, and D based on how often deer will eat them. And it's really sort of helpful. What I'm going to focus on tonight are the plants that are either A or B rating. And some people, depending on how bad their problem is with deer, might want to use more of the A plants and avoid the B plants. And then other people might not have a really serious deer problem, or they might have a dog, which actually is very helpful. And they might be able to incorporate some of the B plants in as well. So basically, I will be referring to that rating system very often in what I'll be talking about today. And I think we can start the PowerPoint now. Okay, it's working. First, I'm going to give you a little bit of information on deer behavior. There are actually 20 to 30 million deer in this country at this time. This has not always been true. In the past 100 years, that has changed dramatically. But you can see why it's such a problem. Deer are creatures of habit, and they really stay in the area that they were born in. They live in these families, and they travel together. And the mothers are the ones who actually teach the babies which plants are the good ones to eat. So that is part of the reason why people will, in different parts of the country, in different areas, will say that a plant is deer resistant, and maybe someone else who lives in a different part of the country will have a different experience with that. And it really depends on what's available to the deer and where they live. If you live near woods, and if you have a south-facing slope, those are the areas that are most popular for deer to live in. They have somewhere to hide, they feel safe, and they can come out in the winter on the sunny slopes and get some additional food when food is more scarce. They also do something called habituate, which means that they become very comfortable living among humans, much more so than some other animals, like coyotes, for example, don't prefer to live near humans. They have to eat 3% of their body weight, and considering how heavy they are, they can range between 7 and 10 pounds per day of plants. And plants are not very heavy, so obviously that's a tremendous amount of plants for each deer. They also can eat poisonous plants. They eat poison ivy, believe it or not. And they're subject to a rule called the 1% rule, which means that as long as they eat less than 1% of their body weight in plants, it's not toxic to them. So generally, they're not going to eat that much because toxic plants don't taste as good. So that's why they can survive if they eat toxic plants. They also can swim. And that explains how they've gotten to Shelter Island and Fire Island and things like that. People might think they're safe, but they're not. They also like plants that are highly fertilized. And what that can mean is that a lot of times when you get a plant from the nursery, the nurseries give the plants a lot of fertilizer to encourage them to grow very quickly. And therefore, the nutrients that are in the plant are very favorable to the deer, and they like that. So they might eat a plant that's highly fertilized that they wouldn't ordinarily eat. So if you can get the plant through the first year through some sort of protection, either repellents or some fencing or something like that, then you might be able to survive for the long term. Another point is that don't use chemical fertilizers such as Miracle-Gro or Osmocote because that is really giving all these nutrients to the plants that the deer like to eat. So a better approach would be to use organic matter and keep your soil really healthy, and then your plants will be healthy without having to be overly fertilized. They also will eat grass if that's the only thing available. Unfortunately, we can't predict that, or we wouldn't have to have lawnmowers. But one of the interesting things is that they like exotic plants in general more than native plants. So that's something to bear in mind when you're creating your planting list. Deciduous plants and trees are a little bit easier to grow in deer-infested areas because, first of all, they lose their leaves in the winter, which is the worst time for deer. They tend to be most hungry in the winter. There aren't as many weeds in the woods where they live to eat. And also, if you can get large deciduous trees, the deer can't reach them. You know, they might just get the bottom of it, but they won't totally destroy the plant. Whereas with evergreens, when they eat the bottom of them, on a cryptomeria such as that, the needles will never recover. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Acorns attract deer. Acorns are a very, very great source of nutrition for deer. And they will draw the deer into your plant beds if you have acorns dropping into your plant bed. So if you have that situation, it's a good idea to clear out all the acorns from your plant bed. They are colorblind, which is fascinating to me because I didn't realize that until recently when I was doing this research. So if you have red plants and you're concerned about the deer being drawn to that, don't worry about it because they can't see red. They are attracted to plants through their sense of scent, not their sense of smell, not through their sight. But they can actually see the color blue. But an interesting fact is that they are mainly not attracted to blue plants. There are many, many blue plants that they won't eat. So that's something also to think about when you're buying your plants. They also don't like fuzzy foliage, such as lamb's ears are well known for having fuzzy foliage. For whatever reason, they don't like that. They'll eat roses, but they won't eat fuzzy foliage. And this is what it looks like when a deer bites on a stem. They don't have sharp teeth. They have grinding type teeth. And so it looks more like it's torn than it's cleanly cut, the way a groundhog or even a rabbit would have a much cleaner cut. So that's how you can tell if a deer has been doing the damage. And this is an example of a deer-resistant planting on a driveway. All these plants here are deer-resistant. And so now I'm going to start showing you examples of deer-resistant plants. This is a hemlock. I hope you can see it. That's a native plant, a beautiful evergreen, but it's not a good plant to use. It's a C rating, so we're going to focus more on the A's and the B's. So if you want to have an evergreen that's not going to have problems with deer, then a better choice would be spruces. Spruces are usually either B's or A's, so that would be safer. And this is a beautiful Colorado spruce. If you like Arborvitaes hedges, which a lot of people love to use them, they're great screening trees, but they have a really bad, they have a D rating in terms of deer eating them. And you can see this is what happens. And once the deer have eaten the bottom of the Arborvitaes, they're never going to get any, they're never going to regrow their foliage. But if you want the same effect, you can do so with using a plant called Hydrangea, which is a form of non-invasive bamboo. These are both native, beautiful native deciduous trees, but the flowering dogwood is more appealing to deer than the sourwood. Apple trees, this is a lovely old apple tree. Unfortunately, if we have a lot of deer problems, we can't grow that. But maybe if you have a deer problem, you'd prefer to have a Kusa dogwood. Deer don't prefer to eat them. Here's a beautiful pear tree, but deer eat those, so we should focus more on amelanchiers, look very similar, shadbush. Snow fountain cherries, beautiful tree. I have one of these, and every year the babies the baby deer learn how to eat cherry trees on my snow fountain cherry. So I would never replant that. But a Japanese maple, on the other hand, would be a good choice if you have a lot of deer problems. This is a beautiful weeping redbud. These are starting to become popular, and if people don't have a deer problem, that would be a beautiful tree to have. But if they do have a deer problem, Katsura, weeping Katsura, looks very, very similar, but deer have no interest in it. Weeping willows are a lovely tree to grow around a water source, a pond or a lake or something like that, but deer like them, so a better choice would be river birch. River birches are really deer-resistant, native, beautiful deciduous trees. This is a type of dogwood with beautiful yellow flowers early in the spring, almost in the winter, but deer like it a lot, so a better choice would be a witch hazel, which also has beautiful yellow flowers very early in the spring. Northern red oak is a beautiful tree native to this part of the country, but a better choice for people who have deer problems would be a paper birch. Now we're getting into the shrubs. Boxwoods are A-rated. I didn't put the A on there. I wish I did, but they're a perfect choice for people who need shrubs that if they have problems with deer. Same with the Russian cypress, looks a lot like this beautiful yew, but deer won't like it, and it stays great in shade, and it's drought tolerant. Hollies are a beautiful evergreen shrub. Everybody loves hollies, but deer also like to eat them, so a better choice would be leucothoe. It's also an evergreen shrub. Mountain laurel is a native shrub with flowers, comes in different colors, beautiful, but obviously it's a very favorite of deer. So if you have that problem, you'd probably be better off using Andromeda. It's very similar. Also, you can get pink flowers or white flowers. The new growth on Andromedas is either pink or red or orange. Really very beautiful plants, and deer don't like them at all. Rhododendrons, Yaku Prince rhododendron is a beautiful dwarf pink rhododendron, but any type of rhododendron is going to be popular with deer. So if you have deer, you'd be better off using peonies. They bloom around the same time. The flowers are very lovely, very fragrant, and deer do not touch them. This is a very columnar type of boxwood that looks just like these columnar hollies, and deer won't touch those either. Hydrangeas are a favorite source of deer, a favorite food source, but this is a viburnum that looks very much like a hydrangea, and deer don't eat this. Climbing hydrangea is a nice thing to put on the side of a chimney or a stone wall, but unfortunately it's a deer food. So this is called Japanese hydrangea vine. It's a beautiful plant. It's just starting to become more popular now, and it's much less popular with deer though. Forsythia, this time of year when you drive around, you see yellow everywhere, and it's so beautiful and cheerful. Now it's interesting, I have this down, it's a B plant on the Rutgers rating, and I have down Japanese Carria, which is also a B, but I'm basing this one on my own personal experience. I have had tremendous amount of problems with deer eating my Forsythia, so I would rate it personally as a D, whereas the Carria is a B, so that's a big improvement. Beautyberry it's a nice shrub in the summer. It has green leaves, but then in the late summer, early fall, it develops these purple berries that stand out, and the leaves start turning yellow, and it has gorgeous fall color. Another great, this is a small, if you don't have a huge property and you can't have a Colorado blue spruce, you can have a globosa, and it's a dwarf variety of a blue spruce. Petunias has gorgeous red leaves, and then it gets these fluffy pink flowers in the summer. Wisteria you can grow on a pergola or a vine, or you could actually grow it as a tree, and it's not a favorite of deer. Sweetbox is sort of an underused plant. It's a very glossy leaf. It doesn't grow very tall. It gets these very nice white fragrant flowers in around this time of year, and it's totally invisible to deer. They don't have any interest in it. Daphne, this is a sort of new variety of Daphne where the leaves look white, and it stands out so beautifully against the dark mulch, and deer don't like it, and it grows in shade very well too. And that also gets fragrant flowers in the early summer. Caryopteris is a beautiful blue plant. That's once again the blue plants that deer don't like so much. It flowers in the late summer when some of the other flowers are kind of past their prime, so that's always nice. And buddleia, butterfly bushes, have come in multiple colors and different sizes. This is a dwarf variety, and they flower for the whole summer, so that's always a nice touch. Leatherleaf viburnum is a nice, it's a nice viburnum. It stays evergreen, which is always good. So it's a great backdrop plant and gets really tall, and these beautiful white flowers. Potentilla is another nice shrub that gets either yellow, red, or white flowers, and that flowers for the whole summer. Spirea is listed on many of the deer-resistant websites as being a great plant. This particular variety, called Shirobana, is my favorite because it gets 3 different colors of flowers on the same plant. It gets white, it gets light pink, and it gets dark pink, all on the same plant, and it's really very beautiful. Now we're talking about some perennials. Pansies are a beautiful flower for this time of year. But unfortunately, deer like to eat them, so a better choice would be Lenten Roses. And they are great perennials that spread over time. Really, they don't grow fast, but once they start growing, they'll spread very nicely, and they come in lots of colors, and they flower for a very long time period, very similar to pansies. Geranium, perennial geraniums, I love them, and I tried to grow Geranium roseanne for years, and even though I used repellents on them, the deer would eat them even if there were repellents on them. So I finally had to give up on them. So I started growing this variety called Big Root Geranium, and they're native. They're called Geranium macrorhizum, and I've never had a problem eating them, and they spread very nicely. They're a great ground cover underneath trees. In dry shade they'll grow, and trying to find something that will grow in dry shade where there are deer around is a very hard thing. So that's a great plant. If you like lilies, I think that's one of those plants everybody knows is not good if you have deer. Most types of irises are very invisible to deer, and Siberian irises, in my experience, have been the most successful in areas where there are deer. Hostas, of course, are beautiful and look so lovely in this woodland garden, but unfortunately, if you have any deer whatsoever, that's the first plant they're going to go for, aside from tulips maybe. But there are alternatives. There's this plant called Brunera Jack Frost. There are other varieties of Brunera also that are green, but this one is a white variety, and this is the perennial plant of the year for 2012. And it has these really beautiful blue flowers in the early summer. And it's an A rating on the Rutgers scale. Lady's Mantle is one of those old-fashioned plants, but it's another great ground cover for shade. It doesn't need to be tremendously moist. It can survive in somewhat dry conditions, and it spreads, which I always love plants that will spread on their own. And it has these beautiful sort of chartreuse color flowers. Here are some more perennials that I have liked to work with. Ligularia is great for moist shade. It gets yellow flowers and big leaves. Macdania I just became aware of last year, but I love these red leaves on them. It's almost as good as a flower having beautiful foliage like that. And this is what hellebores look like when they don't have their flowers. They're still a beautiful ground cover, beautiful green foliage. Delphiniums are, you know, gorgeous colors, beautiful plants that everybody would love to grow, but they're attractive to deer, so a better choice would be foxgloves. They have a very similar look to them, but deer don't eat them at all. In the fall, chrysanthemums are really nice to have in pots or in plant beds, but they are very popular with deer, so a better choice possibly would be autumn crocus, which has the same coloration, but deer are not, it's not at all appealing to them. Blue false indigo is a beautiful native plant, and it has a nice bluish color foliage, and deer don't like to eat that at all. And Thalictrum is another plant with beautiful blue foliage. They look great together, and deer don't like either one of them. This is Coreopsis or tickseed, and deer don't like those. And this is Tiarella. Tiarella looks great when it's planted in these great big masses like this and drifts, and the flowers are all white, and the foliage is nice when the flowers go away too. And then this is Forget-Me-Not, which is a really nice tiny blue flower. This is a native bleeding heart, which is really great because it flowers for a much longer time period than many of the other bleeding hearts, and the foliage is really very beautiful. It doesn't turn yellow the way some of the other ones do, and deer don't touch it. And this is a really nice plant called Ampsonia blue ice, and this is from Melanie Granger's garden. Jan took this photo. It's a great plant for people who have deer problems. This is lavender. I have never had a deer touch my lavender. It's very, very resistant to deer. Astilbes have been really very good also, and they come in many colors. And this is a plant that not that many people are aware of. It's called Rhododendrons, or rue. And it's a beautiful foliage plant. It gets some little yellow flowers in the middle of the summer, but it's really much more about the foliage. It's got a beautiful, delicate, lacy foliage. Perovsky, or Russian sage, is a very tough plant, and deer never get anywhere near it. Forget the black-eyed Susans, that they do eat those, but the Perovsky is safe. And an echinacea is one of those plants that sometimes deer eat it, but the Purpurea variety, that's the native variety, are the ones that some people can get away with growing them, that unless they have really voracious deer, they could probably grow them. Salvias, there's many, many varieties of salvias, all these beautiful colors. This is Maynite. It has a scent to it, so deer don't like the scent of it. And this is a plant I just learned about several years ago that I adore. It's called Stachys humilo. Stachys sometimes is the lamb's ears, but this has a different texture. It's not fuzzy the way the lamb's ears are, but it's still, deer don't like it. It has these beautiful purple flowers too. It's a perennial. Nepeta Cap Mint is one of those plants that a lot of people know is deer resistant, but what people might not know is that if you take the actual plant and grind it up and mix it with some of those self-made recipes for deer sprays that people do, it really intensifies the power of the deer repellent. So that shows how much deer don't like it, that they'll stay away from it. And of course, this is a beautiful Ampsonia and Iris insata. Grasses, okay, basically all grasses are deer resistant. So you could have a beautiful grass garden if you have a lot of deer. And here are some examples of some grasses that I thought are very beautiful. And you can find all these on the Rutgers list too. So, you know, if you don't have time to write them down or something, or you don't have to memorize them because you can just check on the Rutgers list. This is a beautiful grass, pink muley grass. The flowers look like they're foam or something like that. Japanese forest grass, this is a beautiful plant all cascading down a hill. And carex is another great one, sedge. Deer don't touch it. Lots of varieties. This is one of my favorites called ice dance. This is another grass garden, and you can see they're all different types mixed together, and no problems with deer. Here's another type of sedge, and this is another grass garden, and that's what happens in the fall. They look beautiful. All the different varieties of grasses turn different colors. So, you know, it doesn't look boring. It looks very interesting. And here are ferns. Ferns are another variety of plants that are totally deer resistant. All of them are A's, basically. You don't have to worry about deer. In this photo here, we have this type of Japanese painted fern called Ghost, and they're very light colored, and they also grow upright more than the other Japanese painted ferns. So it's kind of hiding. This particular property doesn't have a deer problem, so we have hostas there and double impatiens, which I love those plants, but they're just such a nice plant, ghost ferns, that even people who don't have deer problems will grow them. And here are some more varieties of ferns that you might like. These are some of my favorites. I love ostrich fern. Fortune's holly is a beautiful fern. Autumn fern is kind of glossy, and it lasts a long time. Okay, here are some ground covers that are deer resistant. This is Epimetheus, European ginger. It's kind of glossy. It's nice texture change with other plants. Vinca is beautiful. That's flowering right now for many people. And Laemmel is another beautiful plant for ground cover. This is a traditional Pachysandra. You can plant it in huge masses. It'll take over. And this is the native Pachysandra. And both of those are totally deer resistant. And this is a plant called sweet woodruff. That's a very beautiful ground cover plant that deer don't like. Okay, a little bit on annuals. Petunias are really beautiful. They come in many colors, but unfortunately, they're not good if we have deer problems. So this is an alternative. It's called flowering tobacco, and this also comes in many colors, and deer don't touch it. It's got an A rating. Impatiens, everybody loves impatiens, but deer also love it as well. So another alternative would be annual Vinca flower. And I love this. This is a sort of a lavender color one that it's my favorite, and I have a hard time finding it, but whenever I see it, I buy it right away because it's so great. And that's what it looks. This is actually at my house, and that's more the true color of what it looks like. It's kind of a bluish purple, and I mixed it with ageratum, which is another great plant that deer don't like. And this is where we planted another variety of annual Vinca called Titan Icy Pink, and we mixed it with some Gomphrena Buddy Purple, and that's a nice combination, and deer don't eat either one of those. This is a big planting of geraniums that I took this photo at PepsiCo Gardens, and they have these huge planters full of these red geraniums, and obviously deer are not getting in there because they were fine. But here's some annual salvia that you can plant in big mass plantings, and deer won't eat it, and it will give you the same effect. Cosmos are a nice annual, beautiful mixture of colors, but unfortunately deer like it. A better choice would be Cleome. I love this particular variety called Senorita Rosalita. It doesn't get as tall as some of the other Cleomes, and it blooms much more vigorously than some of the other varieties. And here's an example of a big mass of it planted together. Heliotrope has a scent which people adore, but for whatever reason, deer don't like it. So. Snapdragons are another choice, with lots of colors, but deer don't eat it. And annual blue salvia. I love annual blue salvia planted with the Japanese forest grass is a great combination. And this is another one of my favorite annuals. It's called Angelonia, and this color is called angel face blue, and that's my favorite color of it. This is a plant pot that we did, and I love this combination. This is Lantana, and there's a million varieties of Lantana, and this is called Scaevola, and I think this is called Blue Wonder, the variety of this, and there's blue oat grass in the center. It's a great combination, and deer don't like any of those. This is Verbena bonariensis, And I like it up against the wall like this because it's such a tall plant that you can see it from both sides of the wall. And the boxwoods in front hold it up, and deer won't eat the boxwoods or the verbena. Tulips, of course, we know, forget about it, but daffodils are just as beautiful, so just stick with the daffodils. And alliums, or ornamental onions, are great. Globemaster are my particular favorite because I like how they look even after the flowers go away. They have such a strong stem that they'll stand up for a really long time. Grape hyacinths are really beautiful. They have really strong blue color, once again, that deer don't like. Fritillarias are also kind of interesting structural type plants. Scilla Siberia, that's Siberian squill is the common name of that. They naturalize, and somebody just planted some of these and they just started taking over their whole lawn, and it looked really very nice. I stopped my car and pulled over and took a photo of it. I liked it so much. And then these are snowdrops, and they're probably a little past this year because we're so far along in the spring, but that's such a welcome sight to see that in the winter flowers. Rosemary, this is an herb. There are a lot of herbs that are deer resistant, and rosemary is one of the most deer resistant, and it's also very ornamental as well. Okay, another technique is to use camouflage plants because deer are attracted by scent. If you have a scent that they don't like, then that can help hide the plants that they do like. They don't like the smell of marigolds, so that would be a good choice to use. And they also establish their trails. So if you can kind of keep them from ever having your garden on their trail, then you'll be ahead. You won't have to start from scratch again. So if you can make your garden less attractive to deer, then it will really help you in the long run. And you might eventually be able to use C-rated plants such as hydrangeas if the deer aren't coming onto your property. Okay, that's it.
Hi, good evening. I'm Bruce Laemmel. We have a local landscape company. I've been here for over 20 years. And also have done work in Colorado. That's where I really got started. Actually, even prior to that, I got started years ago with neighbors tooling around with masons and stonemasons, even when I was very young. So, but tonight we're going to talk about deer fences and ideas for your property in order to protect your plants and your property against deer. So I'm going to go through some simple ideas pertaining to deer fences, deer gates, and other things. What I'd like to cover is materials, installations, tools, and simple gates. So I'm gonna start with materials, and then the materials will lead into installations as it goes. And materials, I want to cover posts, and I'm going to cover fencing materials, and then we're going to cover connectors in order to attach the fencing material to the fence and the posts. So what I'd like to start with is I'd like to start with the posts, and I'd like to describe, it depends on what kind of deer you're really up against. You have to sort of learn your property before you really want to install a deer fence. You want to sort of take time to sort of figure out your deer. Because I do have a client that when we did install a deer fence, and it was quite a substantial deer fence, but we didn't realize that there was a major buck on the property that really didn't like the deer fence. So, and also also because of the fact that we put it in the woods, and that the woods themselves were very dense and very old, that during the windstorms and other storms, that branches did come down, and we have done extensive maintenance on the PVC material that we've put up. So in the long run, maybe it was a better possibility to put chain link up. Now, most people don't like chain link, but in some senses in the woods, maybe it would have been a better idea to have put up the chain link and spent the money up front, and then instead of having to worry about Mr. Buck and his family coming in unexpectedly and us having to constantly fix this fence. So you really, really want to take a look at your property and really, really understand it and see who's your neighbor and what's he like, you know. Properties are also interesting too, because that property has a downward slope, and that gives the deer the advantage to, he may be coming down and in the moment of and his impact will be stronger than if he had, like on a flat area, if there were obstacles within the flat, that he may not have as much pressure on the fence. So you really, really have to think about what you're up against with these deer. So I'd like to cover an area excluding the driveway, because the driveway can be very, very expensive. So I'm going to go through an installation of a fence from, let's say, the side of your house on one side, across a yard, doing a gate on one side, doing a gate on another side, and then leading into the woods, and then going around the back of the woods and around the back of the property, and then coming back around and hitting the lawn again, and then coming up to the house and anchoring back on the house again. So, so let's begin. And maybe I'll get into the driveway at the end if you really want me to discuss some of that. So, I'm going to start with the materials, like I said. And with posts, I'm going to start with posts, fences, and connectors. And first I'm going to start on posts. So some of the posts you might want to use are, and what I do use, are 4x4 pressure treated wood. You always want to use pressure treated wood because it's treated and it's good to sink into the ground and it won't rot and break within a couple of years. It's already treated, so you can install it in the hole. So on a 4x4 post, I usually use those. For example, this is a 2x4, but just double this up. This is 4 across, this is 2 across, which is actually true. True is 1.5 by 3 and 3.5. But on a 4x4 post, you would use, if you saw this doubled, you want to use these as anchors and on corners because of their strength. That again back to, and your ends. That back to the fact that you're going to put pressure on the fence when you attach the fence this way and redirect this way, and you need something strong to be able to secure against, and also the possibility of deer coming and hitting it at a weird angle, and ends too, so that it doesn't sag. So you want to go with 4x4s, and then 2x4s are great too. This again going back to the fact that the aggression of your deer. This may determine what kind of wood you want to use on your line post. Your line post means that your long lines of fencing that you're going to install. And when you install this, you don't want to have, you want to have this installed this way, and you want your fence this way, because the strength of the wood is this way and it is not this way. So always angle it this way. So that's a 2x4. Then we have 2x2s, which are great. So this one I really, really use a lot. This is a pressure treated piece of 2x2. And this is actually 8 foot. Sometimes they're hard to get in 10 footers, but you can find them in 10 footers. And also we have angle iron. Now if you want to get into metal, metal is a great thing too. And there's a company called Beener, B-E-N-N-E-R, Beaner's Fence Materials. And if you go online, you can get anything you want and have it delivered, and they'll send it to your house, and you can install your own deer fence. So they're a great company. They have a product that's an angle iron piece of metal, and it's a post about this high. They come in 9-footers sometimes, I think. And they already have a loop. They already have a loop in it, like this actual fence material has a loop in it, okay? And then you can sleeve your zip tie in there, and you can sleeve that through and right around and connect the zip tie with your fence, and you're all good to go. And they're really easy to work with. And then you can also use metal posts, like tubular posts. You can get them at Home Depot. I've used them from there too, but they don't come in black, so I have actually used them occasionally. You can order them too. They're usually 1 3/8 inch. And then you can also, as a post, as you're installing your fence, use, you want to survey your area before you even get started and check to see if there's any opportunity to be able to use trees. You want to use a tree that's at least 6 inches in diameter because of the strength. Again, back to the 4x4 posts, of the strength of the material. And some people also like cedar posts. Cedar has the, like if you've ever seen the supports they put out when they install a brand new tree, and then they wire the tree in so it stabilizes the tree. Those are cedar posts, and they have a nice look. We recently installed one for a client that had about a 6-foot privet hedge, and they didn't want it to look too different or too, like I'll show you when I get into fences, the black netting has a tendency to, you see it a little more. So she used a green wire fence, and then she used the wooden posts that had the cedar bark on it, and it just helped to blend it all into the hedgerow, so it didn't really have a strong look. That's your, and then sometimes we use, people don't like the look of the 4x4 pressure treated post, so they'll have us, I recommend split rail. You know, you have the post and you have the rail, and the split rails come, when you order them, in 11-foot lengths, and they work really great because they give sort of a different dimensional, like a rotten tree has a dimension to it, you know, it has a nice look. And it just breaks it up so it doesn't have so square a look. Because each one of the split rails is a different shape. You know, they're usually 3 sides, sometimes 4, and they have a little bit of curve into them, so it gives it more of a woodsy, natural look. So, okay. And then we've got fencing material. So I'm going to show you the fencing material. So this is what we use a lot. I just brought some samples just so you sort of have an idea. But this is, there's really not too much difference, but this is the green material. We're going to get all tangled here, my goodness. This is the green coated wire material, okay? And it just has a nice, you know, natural green tone to it. But it's a very, very nicely heavy gauged fence. And you can actually order this in a 6-foot height. I don't think I've ever ordered anything greater than 6 feet. And then this material you can get in like 8-foot lengths in height, which is really nice. And this stuff really stands up good against deer, really great impact. This one's a little lighter gauged, but it is a similar material. So those are your fence materials. Some fence, you can also do chain link like I was saying, but a lot of people don't favor that. And then you have connectors like staples and loop nails and zip ties, like I showed you that piece of zip tie. Okay, so anyway, I'm going to go through a little bit of installation now. And I'm going to start from one corner of a house, and we're going to go through some of the, I don't have the tools here, but if you started with a 4x4 pressure treated post, you want to dig that I'm going to start at the corner of a house. And some people don't like to anchor one extra thing into their vinyl siding or something like that. So they'll just use that 4x4 post. So the first thing you want to do is install your 4x4 post first for your first section. And what you're going to do is you're going to need some tools to do all this. So you're going to need post hole diggers. You're going to need, well, you only need one, but post hole digger, ladder. Steel bar is a really, really great tool. If you guys have ever used a steel bar, it's great for getting rocks out of a hole. And then you need a shovel. A really great shovel is a needle nose shovel. It just has a real cool narrow pointed end to it and elongation so that you can get it into the hole and get rocks out too. And you're going to need a saw and sledgehammer, and possibility that you might hit rock and that you can't get your 2 feet in the ground. You need that 2-foot depth, which is really important. 18 inches, 22 feet. Sometimes you really get lucky, you get 3 feet in the hole. And well, you don't want to go too far. Then you really need a long post, because most deer fence you want to go from 6 foot to 7.5 foot high, maybe 8 foot high, depending on your deer. There's your deer factor again. You know, what are you up against as far as deer? How do they jump on your property? How have you seen them? How many do you see? What's your mass of deer? If you got a couple of deer and they're kind of docile and they kind of graze from house to house, and you're in town and you've got a lot of food around and they can graze and they nibble a little bit, then yeah, you can get into a 6 foot high fence. You know, you can test it out, and maybe you can just string your fence up temporarily and see how they did on a 6 foot. But when you get out of town and you get a lot less houses and a lot more deer, then you really need to get into a 7.5 foot, 8 foot high fence on a very level playing field. So, so we're installing the 4x4 in the corner first. We've dug our hole. We've got it down about 2 feet. You're gonna set that pole in, and now you've got a circular hole with a square peg. I don't know, whatever that movie was, Apollo 13 or something. So you put that pole in and you add a little dirt without doing cement. You can just put a little dirt in at a time and turn the steel bar over where the flat side is and just chunk it in there and set it and make it all nice and tight. Add a little more dirt, set it tight, add a little more dirt, set it tight. The best thing, the reason why you're doing that is because you're creating compression, like using a power tamper. Layering. If you throw all the dirt in one time, you tamp it a little bit. When the water goes through it and sucks through it later on and it shifts, you're going to have a loose post, so you don't want that. So you got your 4x4 post set. Now you're going to do one section maybe, or you might do the fence right from here. I mean the gate right from here. But you're probably going to want a gate on each side of the house, so easy access and or one side of the house. So you may run a 10-foot run of the fence material, and then you're going to set another set of 4x4 posts. You know, you're going to set 2 posts so you can set a gate. And same thing, you set the gate, you set the posts, but these you might want to cement because you're going to carry a little weight. So if you have a gate that you think that you're going to make for a wheelbarrow and or grader, remember that a wheelbarrow, you know, everybody thinks, well, maybe it's really big, it's 3 foot wide or something like that. A wheelbarrow is on average like 24 inches wide, 28 inches wide. So you really don't need a big gate, say a 36-inch gate. So let's make a 36-inch opening. So we set the 2 posts, and then from the next section, let's set another post. Now we're going to start going into the woods. So let's downsize. Let's go to our 2x2 pressure-treated post, okay? So we're going to run that 10 or 12 feet, and then we're going to set our posts. And we set this post the same way we set the other one. But these are a little interesting. You might even be able to hammer these in if you cut them with a diamond, an arrow point on the end. And you may be able to just punch into the ground and wiggle it around and get a pretty good size hole and be able to get on top of the ladder and hammer it into place. And then we might run another piece. Now, it's good if you run like 2 pieces of this material and then you can start your fence. So what you want to do is you can actually do this all by yourself. I know people think, oh my God, how am I going to do this all by myself? But you can do it all by yourself, and that's where the staple gun comes into play. The staple gun is a really great thing because you can set your first piece of fence, if you roll it out, like let's say 40 feet, and it'll sort of flop over where it is in the roll, but you can get that piece up there and you can set that first piece and staple it in. Even if you don't get all the way to the top, maybe you put a nail on the top and you loop that first piece in, and then you can staple one or two, and then you can go to the next section and pull that taut and staple that next one, and then you can come back and maybe staple from here to here, and you get your line. And then when you get down to that other end, let's pretend I'm down there, then I can start to pull that fence and start stapling and pull it taut and staple, and then I can run, let's say I'm starting to run into the woods, and then I might be using trees along the way and setting a couple of these posts. And we're going through the woods now, we're coming back around, and then we get to the corner of the house and we're good to go. And we did exactly the same thing. We set 2 4x4 pressure treated posts for a gate, and then we set one on the end towards the house maybe, because you may have a plant bed in there, you know. And then what we do is we get into a gate. Now, a really easy gate is a 2x4, and you use 2x4s and 2x2s and 1x2s, and you use your same, same fence material, the plastic or the wire, and what you do is you take your 4x4 post, 2x4 posts, and you run your 2x2 on top. I've had some of these last. I went and visited one the other day, and one of the first things the client said was, I can't believe it, your gate's still down there, it works great. And I walked down and I measured everything off to possibly do some more work because the dogs have been getting underneath it and everything, and I opened the gate. It opened very nicely after 10 years. I turned around and closed the gate, and it was like I just built the thing. It was just amazing. So you're going to set, this is your hinge side, and this is going to be your 4x4 pressure treated. That's already set. So you've got your 2x4 on this side, and this is going to take all the weight. This is going to take the hinge and another hinge, okay? And this is going to take the latch over here. Maybe you'll have the latch on the post, and this will have a little piece. You add a little extra piece for the latch if you need to. You can cut a little piece of this and stick that on that and screw that through there with 2 screws. And so you set this 3 sides around with the 2x2. 1, 2, 3, right? So we got a 36-inch opening. We want to have like 3/4 of an inch on each side for space. So the hinges and the gate has enough room so that you can have enough room. So if it has a hair of a sag in the future, it might sag a 1/4 inch or something, but you've got that extra space. So you take these, you cut your length and everything, and here you can set 2 screws, 1, 2, right here, okay? Then when you frame that out in the corner, you set 1 screw into the corner. And then when you set that other one, you set the other one there, same way on the bottom as the top, and then you got your 2x2 right here. Set another screw here, set another screw here. Okay, now you have a square frame or a rectangular frame. Okay, so then you're gonna, and you don't do this way, you lay it down on the ground, or nice and horizontal on a nice level playing field, right? Okay, because this would kill you. All right, so you're gonna need a square and maybe a level. Also, we didn't talk about that. All right. So, and then you want some stability support. But first we're going to put the wire on. So we put the wire on, we staple that in, maybe loop nails. They're like little hook nails. People love them. You nail that on there, it's good to go. That's your wire mesh. Now you take the 1x2s. The 1x2s are very hard to get into pressure treated. And amazingly, these fences that I've talked about for 15 years, the 1x2 that's not pressure treated is still there and still kicking and is doing great. So I run, if I can get a piece of 1x2, sometimes I'll cut it down with a table saw or whatever. But if I can't, I use the 1x2 non-pressure treated. So you run that across this way, you get an X on one side, you flip it over, you run across to the other side, you get an X, and that's your stability frame. And then you may want to take an L bracket. You put your L bracket in here, like here, and you put an L bracket here. You screw that on with 4 screws. Another one there, another one there, another one there. You put your hinge on, you put your hinge on that side, you put your latch on this side, those easy latches. And you don't have to worry about, oh my gosh, how am I going to, now I got this all wired in, how the heck do I get to the other side, the latch from the other side? Well, it's really easy. You just cut that little piece of fencing, you staple it on both sides, and you cut a little notch in your deer fencing. You just put your hand around, and you'll open it, you're good to go. So, so now you're all set. And with the wire install, some people, you know, you're up against, sometimes you can't use a nail, or you can't use so you might need to use a zip tie and whatnot. So that's our deer fence. Thank you.